I can still see her name lighting up my phone that night, the call that sounded casual but felt loaded. The way her voice softened at the edges when she said she wasn't feeling well. I didn't think much of it. Migraines were nothing new for her. But looking back, it was the quiet before the detonation. I had no idea that when I set down my fork and canceled our dinner reservation, I was also canceling the life I thought we were building. When Sophie and I got engaged 8 months ago, I thought the hard part was over. We'd navigated the awkward merging of friend groups, the budget talks, and the inevitable debates over who really needed to be invited. She wanted a few more of her work friends there. I didn't care as long as the day was ours. These were the normal bumps I thought every couple had. That Friday night was supposed to be a break from all of it. Just us. Dinner downtown, maybe a walk by the river afterward. I've been looking forward to it all week. I was pulling on my jacket when my phone buzzed. "Hey!" Sophie's voice was soft, almost a whisper. "I'm sorry, but I can't do dinner tonight. Migraine. I just need to rest." I paused, keys in hand. "Want me to swing by with food? You don't have to cook or anything. I can grab your favorite soup." "No," she said quickly, maybe too quickly. "Just no. I don't want to talk. I'm going to sleep." There was a beat of silence before I said, "Okay, I'll check on you tomorrow." We hung up, and I remember thinking I'd been a little too eager to fix things. Maybe I should have just let her rest. Relationships aren't about overanalyzing every conversation, right? The next morning, I woke to sunlight hitting an empty spot in bed beside me. That wasn't unusual. Sophie liked to get up early on weekends. I wandered into the kitchen, expecting coffee brewing, maybe a note on the counter. Instead, I found absence. Her jacket was gone from the hook by the door, her shoes from the mat. In our bedroom, the top of her dresser looked strange. Too neat, too bare. The framed photo of us at my cousin's wedding was missing from the nightstand. I opened the closet, and the air left my lungs. Her side was empty. No dresses, no sweaters, no scent of her perfume. Just hangers swaying lightly, like they'd been moved in a hurry. My phone was already in my hand before I knew what I was doing. I called. It rang once, then went to voicemail. I texted. No reply. By the time I tried again, the line went straight to voicemail without ringing at all. Panic started to set in. Not the slow, creeping kind, but the cold rush that makes your hands shake. I opened her Instagram. Gone. Facebook. Gone. Even her LinkedIn profile had vanished. I drove to her apartment. She'd kept it after moving in with me, just as a workspace. But the lock had been changed. Her neighbor, an older woman who always seemed to know too much, told me she'd seen Sophie loading suitcases into a rideshare late last night. By noon, I was at the police station. I told them she might be in trouble, that she'd left suddenly and wasn't answering calls. The officer, Rachel, listened politely but with a look that told me she'd heard this story before. "Mr. Carter, did she leave any kind of note? Anything to indicate where she was going?" "No," I said. "We had dinner plans last night. She canceled. That's it." "This doesn't make sense." Rachel typed something into her computer. "We can file a missing person report, but if she left of her own free will, there's not much we can do immediately." Her calmness made me feel ridiculous, like I was just another guy who didn't know his partner as well as he thought. But I filed the report anyway, clinging to the idea that maybe I'd hear from Sophie in a few hours. Maybe there was some explanation that would make the surreal morning snap back into focus. By the time I got home, my apartment felt like a stage set after the actors had left. Every room had gaps where her life used to be. I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at my phone until my eyes burned. It never lit up. It had been 48 hours since she'd vanished, and in that time I'd barely slept, clinging to the hope there was some mistake. I was back at the police station, this time in a small interview room with a buzzing fluorescent light overhead. The air smelled faintly of burnt coffee. I sat with Sophie's photo in my hands, the one from our trip to Maine, where she was laughing with the wind in her hair. Officer Rachel sat across from me, flipping through a thin folder until she found the page she wanted. "Michael," she said carefully, "we've traced recent activity on Sophie's credit card." I leaned forward. "Where?" "An airport gift shop," she said. "Just before midnight on the day she left." My chest tightened. "Which airport?" She hesitated, then slid the paper toward me. "JFK. And according to flight records, she boarded a plane to Rome." I stared at the word Rome until it blurred. Rome? She doesn't know anyone there. Rachel's eyes flicked down to the report again. We believe she traveled with someone. His name is Tommaso Bianchi. We've confirmed multiple email exchanges between them over the past several months. I blinked at her. Emails? What are you talking about? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned the page, revealing printed screenshots, subject lines in Italian, messages about counting down the days, and photographs of sunsets over cobblestone streets. There was one of Sophie, taken from across a cafe table, smiling at the camera in a way I hadn't seen in months. The paper felt heavier than it should when I picked it up. My mind reeled back through the past few months, the weekend yoga retreats, where she'd left her phone behind, the sudden change in perfume, the way she'd started locking her laptop whenever I walked into the room. I'd brushed it all off as quirks or stress from wedding planning. She planned this? I said finally, my voice sounding strange in my own ears. This wasn't sudden. It wasn't a migraine. She's been... My throat closed before I could say the word, lying. Rachel didn't correct me. She just nodded slightly, as if confirming a truth she knew I had to face on my own. The rest of the conversation dissolved into background noise. Something about how they couldn't pursue anything criminal since Sophie had left willingly. How I could request copies of the report for my own records. How I should focus on moving forward. Moving forward. For the next few weeks, I did the opposite. My apartment turned into a cave of half-empty takeout containers and unopened mail. The blinds stayed closed. My phone stayed on silent. People called, texted, and knocked on my door. I ignored them all. Every time I thought I might get up, I'd imagine Sophie walking through the door, acting like nothing had happened, and the weight would pin me right back down. It was Liam who finally broke through. One Saturday morning, he let himself in with the spare key I'd forgotten he had. I was on the couch in sweatpants, staring at the muted TV, when he dropped a paper flyer on the coffee table. Get dressed, he said. I didn't move. Not in the mood. Not asking, he said. It's a photography workshop. Weekend thing. My cousin's running it. You like cameras, remember? That thing you used to do before you turned into a recluse. I started to protest, but he cut me off. You can't keep doing this. She's gone, man. You're still here. You need something. Anything. And you're coming with me. Something in his tone. Not pity, not pep talk, just steady insistence. Made me sigh and finally nod. Maybe sitting in a room full of strangers would at least be different from sitting here with my ghosts. I didn't know it then, but agreeing to go with Liam would change everything. The loft smelled like coffee and sawdust and the faint metallic tang of old pipes. Sunlight fell through tall windows in wide, soft sheets, catching dust motes that hung in slow motion. Tripods stood like thin-legged animals along one wall. A coil of extension cords slumped in a corner. People murmured in low, excited voices as they unpacked gear. Mirrorless bodies, vintage film cameras, lenses with caps popping off like soda tabs. I felt like I'd stumbled into a room where everyone already knew the steps. Liam gave my shoulder a quick squeeze, said, "You'll be fine," and disappeared to chat up the organizer. I stayed near the doorway, half hoping no one would notice me, half hoping someone would tell me exactly where to stand and how to breathe. Then she crossed the floor toward me. "Hi," she said, and her smile was the kind that didn't demand anything back. "I'm Hannah. You must be Michael." For a second, I thought Liam had set me up, told her all about me, given her a file of personal details to deploy in the first 5 minutes. But she laughed softly at my raised eyebrows and added, "Liam texted me you might be late, right?" I said, clearing my throat. "Traffic. Traffic," she echoed, like an inside joke with the city. Her hair was pulled into a loose braid, a few strands escaping, and she wore a faded black tee that said "Make the picture first, explain later." "What do you like to shoot?" I glanced down at the borrowed camera hanging from my neck. A DSLR Liam insisted I take, because mine lived somewhere in the back of a closet. "Landscapes," I said, defaulting to the safest answer. "Road trips. Stuff that doesn't move." "Stuff that doesn't move," she repeated thoughtfully. "We can start there. The trick is to make even the still things feel like they're about to tell you a secret." She left me with that, drifting to the center of the room as the workshop started. Her energy was steady, unfussy. No grandstanding. She demonstrated how to check light with the back of her hand, how to shift a subject a few inches and change the whole story of a frame. She showed a contact sheet from a street series. Same corner, 5 different strangers, 5 different moods. You're not stealing, she said. You're noticing. During the first break, people hovered over a table of pastries like birds at a feeder. Hannah moved between small clusters, answering questions, adjusting straps, and offering quick, specific fixes. When she reached me again, I was pretending to fiddle with my ISO to avoid conversation. You can keep pretending, she said lightly, or you can tell me what you actually want out of this. What I want, I repeated. She leaned a hip against the table. Everyone walks in here with something besides a camera. I can tell you how to meter for the windows, but if you're running from something, that changes where you point the lens. I almost said I'm fine, the reflexive lie that keeps people from asking follow-ups. Instead, I forced honesty out like a splinter. I used to love this, I said. Then I stopped. I'm trying to remember why it ever mattered. Her expression softened, but she didn't reach for pity. Try this, she said, taking the camera gently from my hands. Stand by the far window. Don't smile. Don't perform. Just breathe. I moved to the window, the old glass warping the city outside into watercolor. She lifted the camera, then lowered it again. Hold still. Still is my specialty, I said. Not that kind, she said. The kind where you let your face do nothing for 5 seconds. I exhaled, let my jaw unclench. She raised the camera and took one frame. Just one. No rapid-fire click bursts, no shifting angles. When she showed me the back of the screen, my gut pulled tight. It wasn't a flattering photo. It was honest. The hollowness under my eyes, the way my mouth looked like it had forgotten what to do with happiness. And behind that, something smaller and stubborn, like a light at the bottom of a well. That's you, she said, not unkindly. Not the brochure version. That's the person who showed up. Something in me cracked, but not in a way that hurt. More like a frozen thing finding water. We spent the next hour practicing with simple subjects. A chipped ceramic mug, a folded denim jacket, a plant with 3 perfect leaves and one scarred one that wouldn't stop stealing focus. Hannah coached without hovering, always a step away if you needed her, never crowding the frame. When I fumbled my aperture and blew out a shot, she didn't correct me. She asked what I'd been trying to say with the light. It felt like someone speaking to me in a language I used to know. At lunch, I ended up at a small table with her and a guy named Sam who knew too much about lenses and wanted to share all of it. Hannah listened with the patience of a saint, then turned to me and said, "Tell me about your travel list." My what? Places you imagine when meetings get boring. I surprised myself by answering without thinking. Patagonia, Kyoto. The Maine coast again in winter when everything's shut and the ocean looks like steel. Good list, she said. Street work in Kyoto would be a joy. You do a lot of street? When I can. She smiled off to one side, like remembering something she'd seen through glass. People are my favorite still life. People don't hold still. They do, she said. If you stand where they can forget you exist. Her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it. One quick check, something flickering across her face that was gone before I could name it, then flipped the phone face down. Sorry, she said. I try not to let that thing interrupt Saturdays. We were setting up for the afternoon session when the sky pulled clouds across the windows and softened everything. Hannah used it as a teaching moment. Flatter light, she said, means you have to pull mood from shape and gesture. She glanced around the room, then at me. Michael, step into frame for a second. Again, I asked, mock offended. She laughed. You're tall. You make a good anchor. Hands in pockets. Look past me like you just remembered something you meant to say. I did as told. She demonstrated how shifting me 6 inches left changed the line of a shadow on the wall, how raising my chin added confidence I didn't feel, how letting my shoulders fall made the photo less about performance and more about being. See, she said, showing the group the before and after on the tethered monitor. He looks like 2 different men, but it's the same man, 5 seconds apart. Someone whistled softly. I rolled my eyes to deflect the sudden heat in my face. Hannah didn't push it. She moved on, letting the attention slide away from me. I was weirdly grateful. During the last break of the day, I stood by the coffee urn, watching light find the edge of a metal chair. Hannah came up beside me, quieter now, less instructor and more human. "You did good work today," she said. "I didn't really do anything. You showed up," she said. "Sometimes that's 20% of the work. Sometimes it's 90. I looked at her then, really looked. There was that steady kindness again, but also a watchfulness that made sense for someone who spends her life noticing. For the first time in weeks, I felt the odd, tilting sense that I hadn't come to the wrong place. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Try me. What do you do when the thing you love is tangled up with a person you can't look at without wanting to scream?" She didn't blink. "You take the thing back," she said simply. "You let the person keep their mess." Something in my chest shifted, a plate settling after a minor tremor. By the end of the session, people were exchanging handles and promising to send each other edits. Hannah handed out a short list of readings, essays about seeing, about staying. When she got to me, she paused. "I send follow-up materials on Mondays," she said. "Gear notes, links, little prompts so you don't let your camera collect dust again. If you want them, give me your number." I tried to play it cool and failed. "Sure," I said too quickly. "Yeah." She unlocked her phone, held it out. I typed my number, then hesitated in the name field before writing Michael, Landscapes That Don't Move. She smiled when she saw it. "Okay, Michael Landscapes That Don't Move," she said. "I expect at least one photo of something that does." We cleaned up cables and slid tripods back into their bags. Liam reappeared, radiating the smugness of a man who thinks he's fixed the world with one well-timed suggestion. "Good, right?" he mouthed behind Hannah's shoulder. I tried not to give him the satisfaction of a grin, failed again, and shook my head at him instead. On the way out, I held the door for Hannah. Street noise rose to meet us. Buses wheezing, a distant siren, a couple laughing too loudly. The light had thinned into early evening. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it bigger than the workshop. "See you Monday," she said. Then, after a beat that felt casual but wasn't, "And hey, if you go out shooting tomorrow, send me one frame. Just one. The first thing that makes you stop." "Deal." I watched her walk toward a bike locked to a signpost. She paused to untangle the chain, looked up the block for a second like she was waiting for someone, then shook her head at herself and smiled at nothing. I filed the image away without knowing why. Back at my apartment, the air didn't feel as stale. I pulled the DSLR from its bag and set it on the kitchen table. For the first time in a long time, I wanted to take a picture of something that moved. Before bed, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Hannah here. Materials Monday. Don't forget your one frame." A second later, another message. A tiny thumbnail of the candid she'd taken by the window. In the smallness of the screen, I didn't look hollow. I looked like a man halfway between grief and recognition. "That's you," she wrote. "Keep going." What began as workshop follow-ups had turned into a routine that didn't need a name. A weekday text. "Got 10 minutes near the market?" which became 30. A Saturday shoot that ended with bowls of noodles under a flickering sign. A late afternoon loop around the river, filling our pockets with little stories of strangers we'd framed from a distance. I learned that she kept a tiny notebook in her back pocket for overheard lines and addresses she meant to revisit. She learned that I used to collect postcards from places I hadn't been to yet, buying them like promissory notes at thrift stores. When she asked about my family, I told her my mother calls every Sunday and leaves messages that are mostly weather reports and the names of people who said hello. When she asked about Sophie, I said, "We disagreed about the wedding. Small stuff. She liked things neat." I left Italy out of it, not because I wanted to hide it, but because I didn't know how to put that word in my mouth without it taking over the whole conversation. We cut through a block of warehouses that had sprouted galleries and furniture stores, the kind of neighborhood that changes one curated window at a time. Rain beaded on the cuff of Hannah's jacket. She nudged a discarded flyer with the toe of her boot and said, "Give me your hand for a second." She placed my fingers around a metal railing slick from the drizzle. "Feel that," she said. "Cold?" "Sure. But what else?" Before I could answer, she raised my camera and took a close frame of my knuckles. She showed me the shot. The rail's wet sheen, my skin goosebumped, a faint reflection of neon bending along the curve. "Texture," she said. "Half of seeing is remembering you have a body." Is that why you always make me stand in the draftiest spots? I asked. It's for the art, she said, deadpan. Suffer bravely. We walked on. A delivery driver wrestled a stack of boxes onto a dolly. Two teenagers practiced skateboard tricks under an awning. We paused whenever something pulled our attention. Light caught in a bicycle chain. A dog peering over the edge of a stoop like a landlord. It wasn't romantic, not exactly. But there was a gentleness to it. A rhythm that let my shoulders drop lower than they had in months. Later, over dinner at a small place that smelled like garlic and thyme, she asked if I'd taken my one frame. Yet that day, I slid my phone across the table, showing her a photo I'd made of a man sleeping on the bus, his forehead pressed to the window, his reflection layered over a street he was missing. She studied it longer than I expected. You're starting to wait, she said. That's good. Feels like I'm just slower, I said. Same thing sometimes. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and turned it face down again, the same quick move I'd seen the day we met. I filed it away as a habit and didn't ask. We paid and stepped back into the mist. The city lights were brighter now, everything haloed by moisture. We didn't need more coffee, but we drifted toward a late-night place anyway. Ordered tea we didn't drink, and sat by the window. The glass fogged at the edges. People passed, their umbrellas blooming like dark flowers and closing again. I tried to explain to Sophie without saying too much. She liked order, I said. Lists on the fridge. Plans are made 3 months out. If a chair wasn't at the right angle, it bothered her. And you? Hannah asked. I like knowing I can leave the chair crooked without the room falling apart, I said. I thought it was balance. Hannah smiled a little. Sounds like you tried to be the wobble. Or the permission slip, I said. But I also missed warnings I should have seen. I keep replaying conversations, looking for the moment the floor started to tilt. She traced a circle in the condensation on her mug and didn't answer right away. The pause didn't feel like judgment. Felt like a page being turned carefully. When did you last see her? She asked. The night before she left, I said. We had plans. She canceled. Said she had a migraine. I nudged my cup back and forth, leaving a wet ring on the table. The next morning, she'd vanished. At the word vanished, Hannah's eyes dipped, just briefly, as if she were checking a note only she could see. The shift was small, almost nothing. But once you've stared at faces in viewfinders, you start to notice small things. I didn't comment. We talked about shutter speeds and the late bus home, and then we walked. A block later, under the overhang of an office building that had gone dark for the night, she stopped. Rain clattered softly on the metal ribs above us. She looked at me, then away, then back. I could feel the air around her tighten. Not with fear, exactly, but with the pressure of something that had been held too long. I should tell you something, she said. Okay, I said, and tried to keep my voice even. I didn't think it mattered at first, she said. Then it did, and I waited because I didn't want it to be the thing that decides who we are, or whether there's a we at all. She took a breath that sounded measured. I've seen Sophie before. A thin thread of cold tugged along my spine. Where? A corporate event, she said. 6, maybe 7 months ago. A gala thing. I was hired to shoot candids and one of those awkward step and repeats by the sponsor wall. She wasn't on the guest list I'd memorized. But there she was, in a silver dress, laughing like she belonged. I photographed her with a man. She watched my face. He was not you. The overhang made every sound a little louder. I heard the rain, my own pulse in my ears. A bus brake squealing 2 streets over. Describe him, I said, surprised by how steady my voice came out. Tall, she said. Dark hair. Accent. He wore a suit that fit like it had been made for him. He and Sophie stood close, not touching in the photos but orbiting in a way you don't when you've just met. I assumed they were together. I assumed a lot of things that night. Tommaso, I said, the name feeling like a pebble I'd finally spit out. She nodded, slowly. I didn't know his name then. I didn't know hers. It was just a fraction of a day that I filed under work. I didn't connect any of it until the workshop, when Liam introduced us and you said your fiancé liked neat plans. You recognized her? I asked. At first it was an itch, she said. That feeling of a face you've framed before. Then I dug through my catalog for a client sample. And there she was, in the corner of a sequence, the man's hand angled toward her like a compass. I didn't reach out because... She broke off, searching for the right shelf for the words. Because I didn't want to turn your life into a story I was telling you. You deserved to arrive at your own truths. And if I hadn't? I asked. Came out sharper than I meant. Then I would have told you anyway, she said. Just not on day one. Not when you were holding yourself together with string. We stood there with the rain filling the gaps above us. I felt a churn of things that didn't easily fit together. Relief that my instincts weren't fabrications, humiliation at how public their closeness might have been, gratitude and anger braided tight at the thought of this knowledge living in someone else's pocket while I flailed. Why now? I asked finally. Because you asked me when the floor started to tilt, she said. And because I saw your face when you said vanished. I didn't want to be one more person who let you search a room for answers that were already taped under the table. I leaned back against the cold glass of the building. In the reflection, we looked like two people rehearsing a goodbye. I didn't want it to be that. I didn't know what I wanted it to be. I need you to hear one thing, she said. I didn't keep this from you to keep you. I kept it because I wanted anything you felt with me to be about me, not about not her. If that was a mistake, it was mine, not a strategy. There was no defensiveness in her voice, no plea for points, just a clear offering, set on the table between us. Show me, I said, surprising us both. She hesitated. The photos? Yes. We walked to her studio. 4 blocks under a sky that had started to spit again. The kind of rain that makes you blink more than you need to. The studio was small and lived in. Prints clipped to a wire, a couch that had seen better upholstery, a plant leaning heroically toward the single big window. She woke her computer, typed with the crisp economy of someone who knows where everything lives, and pulled up a folder. There, she said. On the screen, a man in a custom suit leaned toward a woman in a silver dress. The frame was clean but distant, a photographer's compromise between truth and discretion. The woman's mouth was open mid-laugh. Her hand floated near his sleeve and then, in the next shot, nearer. Sophie. No doubt. My throat was dry. When was this? She read the date and timestamp. It meant Sophie had stood in that room with him months before she canceled dinner, before the migraine, before the word vanished got carved into my calendar. I nodded once and stepped back. If there was a sound for a piece of denial cracking open, it would have filled the room then. I'm sorry, Hannah said, for what happened, for holding this longer than felt right, for not knowing how to be exactly what you needed, exactly when you needed it. I don't know what I needed, I said, but I think you were right about one thing. I had to choose you for you if I chose you at all. She watched me carefully, not moving closer, not backing away. Are we okay? She asked quietly. I looked from the screen to her, from past to present, from the ghost of one frame to the person standing under this lamp with me. In my chest, the clatter of old questions settled into something that felt like a landing. Tell me one thing, I said. If I'd never met you, if Liam hadn't dragged me to that workshop, would you have still told me? Yes, she said without hesitation. It just would have been colder. Words across a table instead of a walk in the rain. I believed her. More than that, I felt the belief take root somewhere next to the part of me that had been braced against the world. We closed the file. She powered down the screen, the room dimming to a softer kind of night. On the walk home, we didn't talk much. We moved in parallel down damp sidewalks, the city lights still doubling themselves in every puddle like a reminder that most things have more than one reflection. At my building, I paused with my key in the lock and turned to her. Thank you, I said, for telling me, for waiting, for not making me a project. She gave a small, tired smile. For the record, she said, you're terrible project material. I laughed. Quiet, the kind that comes from somewhere unguarded, and stepped inside. In the hallway, the air was warmer, drier, a little stale. My apartment smelled faintly of coffee and the wool of my coat. I set my camera on the counter and stood for a long minute, hands braced on the edge, feeling the room tilt back toward level. On my phone, a text arrived. A street corner at night, shot from Hannah's bike on her way home. Wet asphalt, a trail of red taillights pulled to threads. For your one frame tally, she wrote. Some things move even when they look still. I stared at the image, then at the small patch of window that showed the city's glow. Somewhere out there, the version of me in the silver dress timeline had already started to lose his balance. Somewhere else, the one standing in my kitchen was learning where to place his feet. When I finally set the phone down, I realized my jaw wasn't clenched. My shoulders weren't up around my ears. The past hadn't changed, but its edges felt less sharp. And in the quiet, I could see the shape of what came next. The vintage shop was warm in that way old radiators are. Hissing, uneven, pockets of heat drifting between racks of wool coats and stacks of dog-eared paperbacks. Hannah moved in slow circles, flipping through a crate of old record sleeves, reading the spine of a photography monograph with her head tilted. Outside, winter pressed a gray palm to the window. Inside, a small bell over the door sometimes rang, and nobody looked up. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go. Then a second buzz came like a nudge. I stepped between two racks of jackets and answered. Michael, a voice I knew down to the breath between syllables. Sophie. Air pooled in my mouth before words would come. Around me, the shop felt too bright, like I'd stepped into a light I hadn't agreed to. Hannah glanced up from the book but didn't move, waiting the way she always did, present without hovering. I'm ready to come home, Sophie said, like she was ordering coffee. I made a mistake. The words landed without warmth. I could hear street noise on her end. Traffic, someone yelling, the flat echo you get near tall buildings. I pictured a payphone even though I knew that was ridiculous. Old habits of imagination. Where are you? I asked. Back in the city, she said. I flew in last night. Tommaso's gone. She swallowed. He wasn't what I thought. I let that hang. In the pause, the radiator clicked. A man in a long coat sneezed. Somewhere near the register, a little dog settled in a bed with a sigh like a person's. I made a huge mistake, Michael, she said. Adding weight to the words like that would make them more true. The trip, it was a mess. I was overwhelmed. The wedding, the pressure. He paid attention to me. Felt like relief. And then it wasn't. I leaned a shoulder into the rack until the wire pressed through the fabric of my jacket. You boarded a plane, I said, keeping my voice level. You cleared security, you found your seat, you slept over an ocean, you landed, you made a life with someone who wasn't me. That's a lot of confusion. You're being cruel, she said, the shift to offense quick and practiced. I'm telling you I'm ready to fix this. You're telling me you're done there, I said. That's not the same as wanting me. I saw Hannah slide the book back onto the shelf. She drifted a little farther away, reading a price tag on a lamp with exaggerated focus, giving me privacy without pretending not to listen. The distance felt like a gift. Sophie tried a different angle. He left me with nothing, she said. No apartment, no car. I used my own money for months because he said the accounts were complicated. And then he disappeared. I thought at least you would answer when I needed help. You needed help the morning you walked out, I said. You needed help the week you were writing him emails and lying to my face. You needed help when you stood in a room with him in a silver dress. Remember that? I didn't know then. I know now. A beat. So she told you, Sophie said quietly. Your little photographer. I felt my jaw tighten, then loosen. Hannah told me when it mattered, I said. Not to hurt you. To stop me from inventing a softer version of what you did. Paper bag crinkled somewhere. The bell over the door tinkled as someone left, cold air spilling across the floor and then closing again. I made one mistake, Sophie said, pushing each word like a plea. It was stupid and selfish and not who I am. But you can't say you're innocent either. You moved on. So fast. With her. I almost laughed. Sophie, you vanished. You didn't ask for space. You didn't have a conversation. You erased yourself. And now you're mad that life didn't freeze in place and wait. I needed time, she said. You took it, I said. And then you took more. The spine of a record creaked under my thumb. I didn't even know I was holding one. On the cover, a band posed in front of a brick wall, every face serious. I set it back in the crate. Can we meet? She asked. Just to talk. No expectations. No, I said, not unkindly. There's nothing here to unbreak. You don't mean that, she said, voice dropping into that softer register I used to mistake for sincerity. We were good together. You said so. We had plans. We had outlines. I said. You wrote new ones. Silence stretched. I could hear her breathing, the way it sped up when she was angry, the way she tried to regulate it when she wanted to sound reasonable. So that's it, she said. You're just done. I was done the morning I opened the closet and your life was gone, I said. I just didn't know it yet. She switched tactics again. Your mother asked about me, she said, aiming for a shared history. She said she misses me. Then call her, I said. You don't need me for that. You always do this, she snapped. You act like you're above feeling anything, and then you get to pretend you never loved me. I'm feeling plenty, I said. I'm just not confusing it with permission. Another long inhale on her end. What does she give you? Sophie asked low now. What does Hannah do that I didn't? She shows up, I said. Every time, even when it's hard. Good for her, Sophie said, all sugar gone. I hope she enjoys picking up the pieces when you realize you're not as noble as you think. I'm not noble, I said. I'm just done. There was a click like a tongue against a tooth. You'll regret this, she said, attempting one last lever. People always regret me. I think that's your line, I said, and ended the call. The shop came back into focus the way a lens finds its mark. A woman laughed near the dressing room at a coat that swallowed her whole. The little dog snored. Outside, a gust pushed sleet into the corner of the window and then moved on. Hannah had wandered to the back wall and was reading the handwritten notes taped to a bulletin board. Odd jobs. A lost glove seeking its mate. A notice for a neighborhood cleanup with a doodle of a broom. I walked over. She didn't turn immediately, just let me arrive. Everything okay? She asked finally, voice neutral. It was Sophie, I said. She's back. She wanted to meet. Hannah nodded once. No questions I hadn't offered answers to. No commentary. Just a small, steady acknowledgement that landed exactly where it should. I told her no, I said. Okay, Hannah said. I waited for something else, a check, a test, a sigh. Nothing came. You don't want to know what she said? I asked. She shrugged. Eyes on a photo tacked up with a pushpin. Someone's Polaroid of a cat on a fire escape. Only if you want to tell me. Otherwise, I'm happy to look at coats until we forget what a phone is. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. She said she made a mistake, that she was confused, that Tommaso wasn't who she thought. Hannah's mouth tilted, not quite a smile. Sounds like a lot of people I've photographed at 3 in the morning. She also said I moved on too fast. I added. To what? Hannah said. Breathing. I huffed a laugh that felt closer to relief than humor. Something like that. We drifted back toward the front of the store. Hannah touched the sleeve of a coat, considered it, and let it go. The owner rang up a stack of books for a guy in a scarf big enough to hide in. The smell of old paper warmed under the radiator's breath. I'm not going to pretend I'm neutral, Hannah said after a moment, but I am trying to be fair. I know, I said. You've been careful. Careful and quiet isn't the same as afraid, she said. I didn't say anything because I wanted you to know your no belonged to you. It does, I said. It did. I thought of Sophie's voice, the way she tried to steer the conversation into old lanes. It felt easy to say it, easier than I expected. Maybe because you said it to her before, Hannah said. Just not out loud. At the counter, I bought a thin book of portraits I didn't need. The owner slipped it into a paper bag and handed me a small peppermint from a dish like I was a kid at a barber shop. We stepped outside into the pocketed cold. Snow had started in earnest, flakes catching in the streetlight. The city softened under it, sounds dampened, edges blurred. Hungry? Hannah asked. Always, I said. We walked toward a place that did dumplings and soup without ceremony. The snow made the world feel gentler than it had any right to. I texted Liam a picture of the shop window. Our reflections caught between display lamps and a faded poster for a band that had broken up before any of us cared. Still here, I wrote. He sent back a thumbs up and a red heart that he'd pretend later he'd sent by accident. Over bowls of broth, we didn't talk about Sophie. We talked about a photo series Hannah wanted to start. Older hands holding objects they kept for years, a toothbrush cup, a watch with a cracked face. We talked about whether cameras remember what you point them at. We talked about nothing, which is sometimes the best kind of something. When we walked home, our footprints made a brief map across the sidewalk before the snow filled them. At my door, Hannah pressed her gloved hand to my chest, just over the sternum. A small check. "You good?" she asked. "I am," I said, and meant it in the plain way. She kissed me once, warm, uncomplicated, and headed toward her bike, which she'd sensibly left at home. I watched her turn the corner. I went inside and leaned my forehead against the door for a second. The wood cool, the apartment quiet. My phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "You'll change your mind." I blocked it without saving it. Then I set the phone face down and let the room be just a room. The wind off the water was cool enough to raise goosebumps, but the late afternoon sun poured gold over the sand, softening everything it touched. Hannah adjusted the strap on her camera and grinned at me over the top of the lens, that quick spark in her eyes that said, "You're missing this shot." We were standing at the edge of a low bluff, photographing a couple exchanging vows in front of 30 people and an ocean that wouldn't stay still. I framed the kiss and caught the bride's hair lifting in the breeze. Hannah caught the way the groom looked at her afterward, like the whole horizon had narrowed down to a single point. We didn't even have to talk. We moved in sync, swapping angles, handing off lenses without breaking pace. The work felt light, easy, like carrying something together that would be too heavy alone. Later, as guests clinked glasses and the tide crept closer, I caught myself thinking about the last wedding I'd been meant to photograph, my own. The chaos of it, the tension that hummed under Sophie's laugh, the way every decision had been a negotiation, and every negotiation another round in a fight we both pretended not to be having. Standing here, with Hannah's quiet steadiness beside me, I could feel the contrast like night and morning. There was no need to brace for an eruption, no hidden landmines to step on. When the reception shifted into dancing, we sat on the edge of the deck, our shoes kicked off, toes brushing the cool sand. I sipped from a bottle of water, watching the sky change color. Hannah was scrolling through her shots, deleting only the ones she truly couldn't salvage. I loved that about her. Nothing was tossed out without care. "Small weddings are underrated," she said without looking up. I nodded. "No drama, no overcooked speeches, just the good parts." She smirked. "Says the guy who almost had a guest list bigger than the seating chart could handle." I grinned back, but before I could answer, a shadow fell across us. It was Mark, a mutual friend who'd introduced me to a few photography gigs over the past year. He crouched down, balancing a plate of shrimp skewers. "You hear Sophie's back?" he asked, like he was passing me a piece of gossip about the weather. I blinked. "Back where?" "Here. Been a couple of weeks. She's trying to rehab her image, I guess. Some charity stuff, public events." He shrugged and bit into a skewer. "Thought you'd want the heads up." The wind rattled the strings of lights above us. I took a drink of water, felt the coolness slide down, and realized nothing had shifted inside me. No flash of anger, no hollow pang of missing her. Just nothing. "I'm good," I said, and I was. Mark gave me a look, like he'd been expecting more, then wandered off to the buffet. Hannah had been quiet through it all. She set her camera down, the strap coiling against the wood. "So," she said softly, "I guess I should tell you something before someone else does." I glanced over. Her gaze was steady, but there was a caution in it. "I knew Sophie," she said, "from before. The event I photographed months before we met. You know, the one I told you about? She was there, with Tommaso." I leaned back on my hands, letting the salt air fill the pause. "You knew the whole time?" "I recognized her when you walked into my class," Hannah said. "I didn't know your connection at first, but once I did, I decided to let you get there on your own. I didn't want you to feel like I was pushing you toward anything, or using it to, I don't know, win." I thought about Sophie, about the way every revelation in our relationship had been another bargaining chip, another angle. Then I thought about Hannah, sitting here in the golden light, telling me now, when there was nothing left to be gained by it. "That's not a small thing," I said. "I know," she replied. "It's why I'm telling you now." I took her hand, felt the warmth of her skin against mine. "It's proof," I said. "Of what?" "That you're the kind of partner I didn't even know I needed." I said. The kind who trusts me enough to let me find my own answers. For the first time in years, I felt like my life wasn't something that could vanish overnight. Her smile was quiet, but it reached her eyes. Down on the sand, the bride and groom were laughing, framed by the water and a sun that was almost gone. Hannah and I picked up our cameras again, falling back into step. And just like that, the day kept moving. No unfinished business pulling me backward. No ghosts at the edge of the frame. Just the life we were making in focus. What would you have done if your fiancé vanished and tried to come back months later? Do you think Hannah was right to keep her secret until the end? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, hit subscribe and stick around for the next one.